All right, so we've got Matt Stoller standing by to weigh in on this whole debanking situation. He, of course, writes the big Substack and is an analyst at the American Economic Liberties Project. Great to see you as always, sir.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
All right, so let's take a look at these comments that Andreesen made, which sparked this whole conversation. Here we go.
So, like, for example, we have this thing called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, CFPB, which was it's sort of Elizabeth Warren's personal agency that she gets to control. And it's an independent agency that just gets to run and do whatever it wants, right? And if you read the Constitution, like, there is no such thing as an independent agency, and yet there it is.
What does her agency do?
Whatever she wants.
What does it do, though?
Basically, terrorize financial institutions, prevent fintech, prevent new competition, new startups that want to compete with the big banks.
Really?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
How so?
Just by terrorizing anybody who tries to do anything new in financial services.
Can you give me an example?
Well, debanking. This is where a lot of the debanking comes from, is these agencies. So debanking is when you as either a person or your company are literally kicked out of the banking system.
Like they did to Kanye.
Exactly, like they did to Kanye. My partner Ben's father has been debanked.
Really?
We had an employee who
what?
For having the wrong politics, for saying unacceptable things. Under current banking regulations, here's a great thing. Under current banking regulations, after all the reforms of the last 20 years, there's now a category called a politically exposed person, PEP. And if you are a PEP, you are required by financial regulators to kick them off of to kick them out of your bank.
What?
You're not allowed
but
to
what
have
if you're politically on the left?
Well, that's fine.
No.
because
really?
they're not politically exposed.
So no one on the left gets debanked?
I have not heard of a single instance of anybody on the left getting debanked.
Can you tell me what the person that you know did, what they said that got them debanked?
Oh, well, I mean, David Horowitz is a right wing. He's pro-Trump. I mean, he's said all kinds of things. He's been very anti-Islamic terrorism. He's been very worried about migration, all these things.
And they debanked him for that.
Yeah, they debanked it. So you get kicked out of your bank account.
Just so people understand why Andreesen is so significant. I mean, this is one of the most influential Silicon Valley venture capitalist funders. So what he say is quite consequential, has a lot of sway with the Trump administration. Talk to us about what he says
Trump,
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a con, right? It's important to distinguish between two things, right? One is if you say something or you make a political statement that people don't like, can you lose access to your bank account? And that is a real problem because it does happen, and it happens to people on the right and it happens to people on the left. It's not that common, but you saw it in Canada, you saw it with Canadian trucker protests. Yep. You saw it with WikiLeaks. You saw it with a lot of pro-Palestinian advocates. They lose their Venmo accounts. 2021, PayPal said, we're concerned about people who might be spreading misinformation, right? Yep, so we're going to implement new policy. You do see this fear on the part of financial institutions, financial censorship. It's a real thing, okay? The other side, though, is that you have people that are engaged in what regulators see as potentially risky activity. So this would be things like crypto, right? If you're using crypto and you're engaged in sort of things that look a little bit like money laundering, or if you're doing things like taking $10,000 of cash and depositing it into a bank account every day for a month, banks are going to be suspicious and they are going to file suspicious activity reports.
They're required to, actually.
They are required to. And our banking system works by saying if a bank is suspicious of you for engaging in all sorts of activities, mostly money laundering and fraud or other forms of scams, they are required to take action. Now, those are different things, right? Those are very different things. And we do know that debanking for political purposes happens, but we also know that banks are required to actually implement law enforcement and to be a little bit suspicious. It's a little bit like you go to a stop sign, right? There's no due process at a stop sign. Even if running the stop sign, it doesn't going to cause any problems, you still have to stop at the stop sign. So that's the way our banking system works. Now, by what Marc Andreesen is doing is he's conflating these two things intentionally. And the reason he's doing that is because he has specific investments in companies, two of them that I can think of, one called LendUp and one called Synapse, that have both been put out of business by the Consumer Financial Protection Agency for stealing from customers, all right, or for collapsing and costing people their life savings. These are not crypto companies. One of them is a payday lender. The other one is a fintech firm that connects people from apps to their bank accounts. And it was just forms of fraud. And the CFPB went after his investments, and he's mad about that. Now, the CFPB is a consumer financial protection agency. They don't actually do the things that they don't go to banks and say, we're really nervous about you having these people banking. Those are other agencies. The CFPB is the one that protects consumers. And it's also one that in the past couple of years has actually tried to say, as part of their regulatory authority, we don't want debanking based on race, religion, political views, et cetera, et cetera. And they've been stopped by Trump judges from actually trying to prohibit those forms of debanking. So that's what's going on.
The full disclosure, I consider Marc a friend, but the actual defense of this that I have seen, let's put the next part up there on the screen. This is from a pro-crypto advocate, Nick Carter, and he writes here about, quote, Operation Choke Point 2.0, crypto in his crosshairs. As I understand it, the defense that Nick and others have put forward on Andreesen's comments is that the FDIC and the US government have put in place very onerous regulations, basically disallowing crypto companies to be able to do business, allowing an effective monopoly to the banks. And so what Andreesen there is talking about is about this US government regulated SEC FDIC initiative, which allows them under this quote unquote Operation Choke Point 2.0 to basically disincentivize crypto, other fintech or whatever innovation. So what's your response to Nick?
Well, that's not what he said.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, if Marc Andreesen is going to say, I don't like what the FDIC is doing and I don't like what they're doing to prohibit crypto businesses from operating, he should say that. But he didn't say that. He said, I don't like the CFPB, right, which isn't doing any of the things that he suggested.
Right, and which this person doesn't even claim they are, right?
Right, and he didn't say...
Nick has, to be clear, Nick has been like, I think he misspoke. And this is what he was talking about.
Okay, well,
yeah, I'm just saying. I'm giving the
fair enough. But I'm only taking his comments. I mean, and he spent a while on Joe Rogan saying they're terrorizing financial institutions for political speech, right? And then they're kind of like, oh well, he didn't really mean it. All right, well then don't say it, right? I mean, the point here is, if you want to have a debate about crypto, and we can have a discussion about crypto, and the banking system, and that's fair, but the point here isn't to have that discussion. The point here is to say, if policymakers are going to regulate crypto in a certain manner, it means that if you say something that they don't like, that they can debank you. And that's a con. It's not true. What they should be saying is they should keep those two things separate and say, we want to have a debate about whether you should be able to do your crypto thing, which, and we're going to have a discussion about debanking because you say political speech. But I think it was pretty clear in that clip that Marc Andreesen put out to millions of people that he was saying you could be debanked because of what you say, right?
That it's the CFPB that's doing it.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It's the CFPB doing it. And he didn't say, oh, by the way, I have these investments that ended up hurting a lot of people, and the CFPB came for deception, not like and the CFPB came in and said you can't do that, right? He didn't say that either. So it's like I'm not inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. And with someone like Nick Carter, I mean, fair enough, the guy misspoke, but you can't just say, oh well, yes, there are these massive conflicts of interest, and oh he didn't mean what he said, even though he said it to millions of people. And then I'm going to talk about the thing I want to talk about. It's like you can't. That's not a form of fair politics.
I think that's fair. I think as I understand it, there are two things happening. There's this conversation about the debanking for political purposes, and I do think it's pretty clear the CFPB, Rohit Chopra in particular, has spoken out against debanking. So we got to give him that benefit of the doubt. On the crypto side, I think what it is a lot of regulatory fear. I mean, let's be honest too. There's a big right-wing kind of marriage, I guess, now with the crypto industry. And so that is the lens through which they're looking at it about, quote unquote, being debanked for these purposes. I do think it's an interesting conversation. For example, I saw David Marcus, who previously led the Libra project over at Facebook, or I guess Meta now, talking about being debanked. And I was like, well, to be honest, I think that was a good thing. I don't really want the global financial system to be run also by Meta. So there is
also, I think Meta still has a bank account.
Yeah, Meta still has a bank account. But the point was, actually, you and I talked about Libra a lot at the time, because Libra, for people who don't remember, is, what was it? It was basically like a platform for global financial transactions that would be run by Meta. And I'm getting a lot of this, technologically incorrect, but it was effectively
they
run
kept changing
on a
it. I'm
meta
sure it was-
blockchain, which they would adjudicate and run to get around the global financial banking system and effectively allow them to control payments, which has been very profitable for Visa and for all these other places. I would be very concerned about that. So I think it's a fair conversation around regulation. And I guess I'm not giving Marc, quote unquote, benefit of the doubt or whatever, but that does seem to be like the high IQ version, I guess, of what's happening.
It's just hard for me to accept that when that's not remotely what he said. It's like, he didn't even talk about crypto, does he? I mean, he's
No,
just
he
talking
talks
about
about crypto
political
later on.
speech. Later,
Yeah,
later on he gets to crypto. But the other piece about it that irritates me is his characterization of this agency, which was inspired by Elizabeth Warren, but Obama wouldn't even put her in as the first head of the CFPB because he was, I don't know, afraid. And then it's portrayed as just like her personal governmental arm.
And they have the authority to do anything, including terrorize people. I mean, he's talked about that. He consistently said they terrorize and it's unconstitutional, and all of these like ideologically freighted arguments about how we never had an administrative state, which is not true. I mean, that's just not a real reading of history. I think there's a broader point here, though, which is that the Trump administration is coming in on a populist wave. That is different, I think, than the traditional Republican Party. And we all know people on the new right. They have different views about how to regulate the relationship of the government and the state. Sorry, the government and private interests. And one of the things that's happening is there's this attempt to kind of subvert the new right within the Republican Party by conflating legitimate points of disagreement, like crypto policy, with this other thing, like should we have an administrative state that could protect people? And I can guarantee you that the CFPB can be a super useful tool for Trump to protect his new working class voting coalition. But it is also something that I think a lot of the billionaires that are backing him really would prefer out of the way so they can steal from that working class coalition, right? And that's the tension. And I think the danger here among populists on the right is that they fall for the cultural arguments that are, I think, legitimate, but are conflated, and I think dishonestly, with the broader attack on the administrative state. So that's that's what I worry about here.
What do you mean when you say how Trump could use it? Like, could you give an example?
Well, I mean, I think, Synapse is a good example, right? Okay. Synapse is a company that connected new fintech apps to a bank account, and they had a dispute with the bank that they were working with, which is called Evolve Bank, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars that are caught in the middle. No one knows what happened to the money, and now a lot of people are missing their life savings. I don't know if those are Trump voters or if they're Biden voters. My guess is it's probably both. And the CFPB came in and is investigating and trying to, get some of the money out and get some of the money back. That would be an example. But there's a ton of other examples from, payday lenders to just Wells Fargo with the bank accounts, right? Yeah. Opening up fraudulent bank accounts. So it's just like anything that banks can do to screw you over, or Venmo or any of these payment apps, or the new big tech payment systems. Like there is supervision that is coming from the CFPB. All of that stuff can be really useful. Think about all the surveillance that these companies can engage in over your payments and how they can manipulate what you pay. All that stuff can be overseen by the CFPB or by other administrative agencies, or it cannot be. Right? Yeah. Or you can just let Meta and Walmart and whoever just kind of work together to charge you more when they know you'll pay versus not. And I think that's kind of the open question, right? Is where is Trump going to go? And we can see that this is a move from Marc Andreesen, who's a very smart guy, to push the Trump in a certain direction.
As another example, just last year they returned $140 million to consumers who were hit by illegal junk fees in banking, auto loans, remittances. Over its lifetime, it's returned $19 billion to consumers. Kyle actually was hit with some of these illegal fees that he was, a beneficiary of Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I think your point, which has helped me understand what's going on here, is that it's very easy to be like, oh, Elizabeth Warren's associated with it. you don't like her, right?
Right.
She's this, political villain, or I'm trying to create her as this political villain. Ergo, this agency that she's somewhat associated with must be part of the bad administration, administrative state that you want to just get rid of. When in reality, this is probably one of the parts of government that has been most effective in actually protecting and delivering for regular people.
It is. That's exactly right. And I would say, like, another example that is not, poor put upon consumers, but is maybe more what Marc Andreesen is talking about, which is competition. They just implemented what's called an open banking rule, right? Where they said your data at your bank account, right, is yours. And if you want to take it somewhere else, you can. They have to make it easier to switch bank accounts with all of, your bill pay and all the rest of it. And that, one of the reasons, so I got screwed by Capital One. They said, oh, we're going to pay you a certain interest rate. And then a few years later, I was on my bank account. I was like, oh, I'm not getting it. What happened? They're like, oh, there's some technical.
I read about this. I know what you're talking about.
I was like, and then there was a class action they lost because they, right. But I wanted to switch. And it's a pain in the ass to switch bank accounts, right?
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
So this open banking rule, which was put into statute in 2010, right? And Rohit Chopra finally implemented it, right? Is going to go into effect, and that's going to allow new companies, new banks, new fintechs to come in and compete for your business, right? It's going to help innovation, and it's going to threaten the big bankers. Well, the big bankers are really mad about it and are suing the CFPB about it, and that's kind of a big fight. Now, if you accept Marc Andreesen's argument that the CFPB is this Elizabeth Warren agency that's just out for terrorizing, financial institutions and doesn't like competition, then why are the bankers suing to block the CFPB from forcing the banks to allow competition, right? That's kind of the question here. And I think we have to move beyond these old kind of hoary arguments about the administrative state and get to the point which I think Trump is going to realize, which is that this is a complex society and you have to figure out how to govern it, right? And I don't think Biden figured that out. I don't think we've had effective governance for a long time. And we need it. And they're going to have to figure out something, right? And I think if you listen to Marc Andreesen, they're not going to figure it out, right? And then you're going to see the same thing we've seen for a long time, which is swings back to the other party, right? And that's the broader point here. It's not just about the CFPB. It's about, can you accept governance, right?
That's fair. Interesting rebuttal. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Matt, always great to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.